The blizzard had swallowed Silver Pine whole. Deputy Owen Carter was minutes from ending his shift when Axel, his aging German shepherd, froze mid-step. Then came the bark. Sharp, desperate, echoing through the snow-filled street toward a garbage truck lifting a metal bin. "Axel, what is it?" Owen called, but the dog didn't move, and then he heard it, a faint cry beneath the roar of the engine. Owen sprinted forward, flashlight slicing through the storm. Inside a torn blanket lay a newborn, blue-lipped and barely breathing. He took off his jacket, wrapping the baby tight. Axel pressed close, whining softly, as if guarding something holy. What they found that night would uncover years of buried secrets, and prove that sometimes angels don't have wings, they have paws. What happens next will make you cry, and believe in miracles again. But first, tell me, where are you watching from? Type your country in the comments. The town of Silverpine, Colorado, lay buried beneath a storm that refused to end. Snow fell in relentless waves, soft at first, then sharp as glass. The wind howled through pine-covered ridges, rattling old porch doors and leaving the streets empty but for a single patrol car crawling through the white abyss. Inside the vehicle, Deputy Owen Carter, 36 years old, rubbed his gloved hands together and exhaled into the freezing air. A former Army military police officer, Owen had served 2 tours overseas before settling in this small mountain town, seeking quiet after years of noise. His dark brown hair, brushed with faint silver at the temples, matched the storm gray of his eyes that rarely missed a thing. He wore his Navy sheriff's winter jacket zipped high to his neck, his badge dulled from years of use. On the passenger seat, his longtime companion Axel, a 7-year-old German shepherd with thick sable and black fur, sat upright and alert. Axel's muzzle had begun to gray, his amber eyes wise and weary. Even retired, he moved like a soldier, disciplined, deliberate, and watchful. "Almost done, buddy," Owen murmured, his voice rough from the cold. "Just one more block, then home." The dog tilted his head slightly but didn't relax. Outside, the snow hissed against the windshield, illuminated by the patrol lights that blinked in muted blue and red hues. The world was still, too still. Owen's radio crackled faintly, a dispatcher's voice barely audible through static. "All units clear. No calls. Stay warm out there." He smiled tiredly. "No worries. We're just ghosts in the snow tonight." But Axel's ears pricked forward. The dog's body stiffened, his nostrils flaring. Then, a low growl, a sound deep in the chest, not aggressive but alert. Owen glanced toward him. "What is it, boy?" Axel turned his head sharply toward the right side of the street. Through the swirl of snow, Owen saw the faint yellow glow of hazard lights. A garbage truck, its engine rumbling, arms lifting a large metal bin toward the compactor. The wind carried the metallic groan of machinery. Then a bark. Loud, urgent, and the kind of bark that made Owen's heart stutter. "Axel, stay," he said instinctively, but the dog didn't obey. Instead, Axel lunged forward, paws scraping against the window, barking with a desperation Owen hadn't seen since their military days. "Hey, easy," Owen shouted, pulling the car over and killing the siren. The world outside roared with the wind and Axel's frantic cries. He stepped out, the cold slamming into him like a wall. Snow whipped across his face as he approached the truck. The driver, a heavy-set man in a neon orange vest, stepped down from the cab, his breath steaming. "You okay, officer? Dog sounds like he's found a ghost," the man said, half laughing, half irritated. Owen held up a hand. "Stop the compactor!" The driver blinked, confused. "What? It's just trash." "I said stop it!" The sharpness in Owen's tone froze him mid-step. The driver reached up and hit the emergency brake. The machinery whined, then fell silent. Axel's barking grew more frantic. He darted to the side of the truck, circling near the rear tire, paws digging into the snow. Owen followed, his boots crunching through the drifts. The dog whined, then barked again, pointing his nose toward the metal bin that hung half-raised in the hydraulic arms. Owen's stomach tightened. "Hold on," he muttered, climbing onto the truck's side rail. The flashlight beam shook slightly in his gloved hand. For a moment there was nothing but the whisper of wind and the low growl of the idling engine. Then, a sound. Faint, thin, almost swallowed by the storm. A cry. Not mechanical, not animal, human. "Dear God," Owen whispered. "Stop the lift." The driver, pale now, slammed another switch. The bin lowered with a hiss, swaying slightly. Owen yanked open the lid and froze. Inside, beneath layers of newspapers and soaked rags, lay a newborn baby girl. Her tiny chest rose and fell with weak, uneven gasps. Her lips were blue, her skin ghostly pale. Owen's breath caught. Training took over. He dropped his flashlight into the snow and pulled off his jacket in one swift motion. "Call 911, he shouted to the driver, voice trembling. "Tell them it's a newborn. Hypothermic, barely breathing." The driver fumbled for his phone, hands shaking. Owen gently lifted the infant into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Her cry came out as a fragile wheeze. "Hey there, little one. Hang in there," he whispered, pressing her close to his chest. Axel stood beside him now, no longer barking, his body low and calm. The dog sniffed the child softly, then sat protectively against Owen's leg, tail still. Owen could feel the baby's heartbeat. Faint, but there. He wrapped the jacket around her tighter, trying to shield her from the biting wind. The driver's voice shook behind him. "EMS is on the way. They said 5 minutes." 5 minutes, Owen repeated quietly, his breath fogging the air. He crouched in the snow, holding the infant close, rocking gently. "Come on, sweetheart. You're not done yet." He glanced down at Axel. "You did good, boy. Real good." Axel's eyes met his, calm and unwavering. Snow clung to his fur, melting against the baby's blanket where his muzzle touched. 5 minutes felt like forever. Owen could hear the faint siren in the distance, swallowed by wind. The storm pressed against him, cruel and heavy, but he didn't move. He thought of his years in uniform, the chaos, the loss, and how, in all that darkness, it was always this dog beside him. Tonight felt no different. When the ambulance lights finally cut through the storm, Owen exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. 2 paramedics in thick parkas ran toward him. "It's a girl," Owen said hoarsely, handing the child over with care to Naum. "Found in a trash bin. Get her warm. Now." The medics nodded, their movements fast but careful. One placed an oxygen mask over the tiny mouth while the other wrapped her in heated blankets. The driver stood aside, pale, muttering prayers under his breath. Owen straightened slowly, his knees stiff from the cold. He looked down at Axel. "Let's go, partner. Our shift just got a lot longer." They followed the medics to the ambulance, the snow crunching underfoot. As the rear doors closed and the siren wailed back to life, Owen felt something shift inside him. A weight, familiar yet strange. He reached down, brushing snow from Axel's ears. "We'll find who did this," he murmured. "Whoever left her out here." Axel whined softly, as if in agreement. As the ambulance disappeared down Main Street, its lights fading into the white horizon, Owen stood in the storm's silence. A man, a dog, and a promise left in the snow. He didn't yet know that this night would unravel years of buried secrets, that the cry of one newborn child would lead him into the darkest corners of Silverpine's past. For now, he just watched the storm close around them. Axel nudged his leg, ready to move again. Owen looked down at his partner, half smiling through the exhaustion. "Come on, boy, let's go home." The snow kept falling. The town slept on, unaware that a miracle had just been pulled from its garbage. Snow still lashed against the glass doors of Silverpine General Hospital, a small medical center perched on the edge of town, where light seemed to battle darkness through every storm. Inside, the corridors were hushed, sterile, and nearly empty. The overnight staff had been reduced to a skeleton crew because of the blizzard. Clara Reeves, the night nurse on duty, was halfway through filling out patient charts when the emergency intercom crackled to life. Incoming unit. Infant emergency. Found outdoors. ETA 2 minutes. Her pen froze midair. Clara was 32, slender, with steady green eyes and a calm presence that patients often said felt like home. Her auburn hair was tied neatly under her nurse's cap, and the soft blue scrubs she wore contrasted with the pale glow of the hallway lights. She had worked in Silverpine for 6 years, having moved here after losing her husband and unborn child in a highway accident near Denver, a tragedy that had left her clinging to her faith. Now, she lived alone in a small apartment overlooking the mountains, her days filled with quiet prayer and long shifts that rarely saw daylight. She rushed to the ER bay, her boots squeaking on the linoleum. The automatic doors slid open to reveal Deputy Owen Carter, his face raw from the cold, his jacket gone, his uniform soaked through. In his arms lay a tiny bundle wrapped in dark fabric. "She's barely breathing," Owen said, his voice hoarse. Snowflakes clung to his dark hair, melting into beads that rolled down his cheek. Behind him, Axel padded in silently, his fur dusted white, eyes locked on the child as if unwilling to let anyone else near. Clara guided Owen to a small trauma room where the heat lamps hummed to life. She peeled back the soaked blanket and gasped softly, "Dear God." The newborn's lips were purple-blue, her tiny chest rose and fell unevenly. The umbilical cord had been clumsily cut, and faint bruises marred her wrists. "We'll warm her first," Clara said firmly, snapping into motion. "Let's go. I need a warming pad and oxygen." Owen moved to assist without being asked, placing the baby on the table under the lamp while Clara secured small wires to her chest. The monitor beeped weakly. Slow, then faster, the faintest flutter of life. "What's her name?" Clara asked without looking up. Owen hesitated. "She doesn't have one." Clara's hands paused. Then she smiled softly. "Then we'll call her Hope, for now." Owen swallowed the lump in his throat. "Hope," he repeated quietly, as if the word itself could anchor the tiny soul back to life. Axel settled at the foot of the bed, head resting on his paws, golden eyes unblinking. The storm outside groaned against the windows, but in the small room, time seemed suspended. When the baby finally cried, a fragile thin wail that pierced the hum of machines, Clara's eyes glistened. She turned to Owen, who stood frozen in disbelief, his gloved hands clenched. "She's strong," Clara whispered. "You brought her in just in time." Owen exhaled a trembling breath, shoulders sagging. "I didn't," he said quietly. He did. He glanced toward Axel, who lifted his head, tail thumping weakly once against the floor. Clara knelt beside the dog, her voice soft. "Then thank you, hero." She ran a hand gently over his fur, and Axel leaned into the touch, sighing deeply as if releasing the tension of the night. An hour later, Hope slept in an incubator. Tiny fingers curled beneath a soft hospital blanket. Clara checked her vitals, making quiet notes on her chart. Her handwriting trembled slightly. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd held a baby. Owen sat on a nearby bench, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. His uniform still clung damply to him, his hair flattened from the melting snow. Clara noticed the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind that went beyond physical fatigue. "You should rest," she said gently. "You've done more than enough tonight." "I can't," Owen murmured. "Not until I know she's safe." Clara studied him for a moment. There was a steadiness in his voice that told her he wasn't the kind of man who walked away from things easily. She'd seen plenty of people break under pressure, but not him. He had the look of someone who carried others' burdens, even when his own were too heavy. "Do you have anyone at home?" she asked quietly. Owen shook his head. "Just him." He nodded toward Axel, who lay curled beside his boots, half asleep but alert enough to open one eye whenever someone moved near the baby. Clara smiled faintly. "A good partner." "The best." The room fell into a calm rhythm. The hum of heaters, the quiet ticking of monitors, the muffled storm outside. At around 3 a.m., Dr. Nathan Collier, the on-call physician, arrived. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, with a round face and spectacles perched on the bridge of his nose. Known for his blunt kindness, he had been Silverpine's head physician for decades. He entered wearing a thick parka over his scrubs, muttering about the weather. "What's the situation?" he asked, rubbing his hands together. "Female infant," Clara replied briskly. "Found in outdoor waste container. Severe hypothermia, slight bruising. Stable now, temperature rising, pulse improving." Dr. Collier inspected the baby, his expression softening. "Lucky little thing," he murmured. "She shouldn't have survived this cold." He looked at Owen. "You the one who found her?" Owen nodded. "My dog did." The doctor smiled faintly. "Then both of you just saved a life tonight." He patted Owen's shoulder and turned back to Clara. "File her as an emergency custody case. We'll alert child services in the morning." When he left, the room felt quieter again, the hum of the machines lulling everything into fragile peace. Clara leaned against the wall, her eyes on the incubator. "You know," she said softly, "most people don't believe in signs anymore, but I do. Sometimes God sends us reminders when we've lost sight of hope." Owen followed her gaze to the tiny form sleeping beneath the glass. Then maybe this was one of them. She smiled, weary but genuine. Maybe so. The wind outside began to ease, the storm finally losing strength. Owen stood, stretching his stiff shoulders. He walked to the window, looking out at the endless white. The streetlights glowed dimly, their halos blurred by falling snow. He could still see the image burned into his mind. The trash bin, the faint cry, Axel's frantic bark. If not for that single moment, this child would have vanished into silence forever. Behind him, Clara adjusted the blankets inside the incubator, humming a quiet lullaby under her breath. The tune was old and gentle, something her mother used to sing when the world felt too heavy. "Do you think she'll make it?" Owen asked quietly, without turning. Clara's hand lingered on the incubator. "She's fighting. That's all that matters tonight." Owen nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "Then I'll make sure whoever did this doesn't sleep easy again." Axel lifted his head, ears twitching at the tone in his voice. Clara met Owen's gaze, understanding more than he said. "One step at a time, Deputy. Tonight was about saving her. Tomorrow will be about finding the truth." Owen looked down at Axel, who stared back with calm loyalty. The old dog's eyes seemed to mirror something inside him, an understanding that some battles weren't fought on fields, but in hearts. He crouched to scratch behind Axel's ears. "Let's get her through the night, partner." As dawn began to edge faintly over the mountains, pale light spilled into the ER room. The storm had passed, leaving Silverpine blanketed in peace. Inside, warmth replaced the cold. The newborn stirred softly, her tiny hand curling into a fist beneath the glass. Owen watched in silence, a small smile ghosting his lips. Beside him, Axel rested his chin on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. Clara turned off the overhead lamp, her voice gentle. "She's safe now." Owen nodded, eyes never leaving the incubator. "Yeah," he whispered. "For now." Outside, the world began to wake, unaware that a miracle had taken its first breath inside a quiet mountain hospital. Morning came gray and bitter in Silverpine, Colorado, the kind of cold that burned before it numbed. The blizzard had calmed overnight, leaving a quiet that felt almost sacred, as if the storm itself were holding its breath. Frost clung to streetlights, mailboxes, and the roofs of shuttered diners. The snowplows hadn't yet cleared the main road, and only a few early risers dared to step outside. Deputy Owen Carter parked his patrol SUV at the edge of Maple Street, the same spot where the garbage truck had been the night before. Axel sat in the back seat, ears perked, fog clouding the window with every steady breath. Owen's uniform was dry now, freshly pressed, but his eyes carried the exhaustion of a man who hadn't really slept. The image of the newborn, her pale face, her fragile cry, had replayed in his mind through the short hours of dawn. All right, partner, he said quietly, clipping Axel's leash. Let's see what else the snow's hiding. The world outside the SUV was eerily silent. The storm had buried most of the evidence, yet Owen trusted Axel's instincts more than any camera or forensic tool. They moved slowly along the curb, the sound of boots crunching through snow echoing off the brick walls of nearby shops. The garbage truck was gone now, only a patch of flattened tire tracks and a faint indentation where the bin had stood. Owen crouched down, brushing snow aside. A few scraps of torn paper remained, damp, half frozen, but nothing substantial. Axel sniffed along the path, tail low but steady. Then, suddenly, he stiffened. His nose pressed against the snow near a storm drain, then darted toward a narrow alley between two old buildings. "What is it, boy?" Owen followed him, flashlight cutting through the dim passage. The alley smelled of rust and wet cardboard. Stacks of old crates leaned against the walls, and a single flickering bulb hung above a back door. Axel nosed forward until he stopped beside a small pile of discarded snow and trash bags. He pawed once, twice. Owen knelt and pulled back the top layer. A plastic bag, half buried beneath slush, glimmered faintly. Carefully, he lifted it with gloved hands. Inside was a blood-stained towel, a few torn baby wipes, and a folded scrap of paper. He unfolded it slowly. The ink had bled from moisture, but the words were still visible, shaky, uneven handwriting. "I'm sorry. I had no choice." Owen exhaled, the words misting in the cold air. "Whoever you are," he muttered, "you wanted this to be found." He sealed the bag in an evidence pouch, marking it with his initials. "Good work, Axel." The dog wagged his tail once, subdued, as if sensing the heaviness of the discovery. A voice called from the street behind them. "Carter, you out here?" Owen turned. Sheriff Harris Boone approached, his thick winter coat dusted with snow. He was in his late 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair cropped close and weathered face that carried both wisdom and weariness. Harris had been sheriff of Silverpine for over 2 decades, a steady hand in a town that trusted him completely. "Morning, Sheriff," Owen said, holding up the evidence pouch. "Found this behind the grocery alley. Looks like the mother left a note." Harris squinted, lowering his scarf. "You think it's her handwriting?" "Has to be. Paper's thin. Probably tore from a notepad. Bloodstains match what was on the towel. She wrote it right after." Owen trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought. The sheriff nodded grimly. "And the baby?" "Stable. They're calling her Hope," Owen replied. "Clara and the hospital staff pulled her through." "Good," Harris said softly, then motioned toward the alley. "Bag it and log it. We'll send it to the state lab, but I doubt we'll get much. Storm likely washed away any prints." As Owen worked, the sheriff crouched beside Axel, running a hand down the dog's back. "Still got it, huh? Heard about your heroics. Guess retirement doesn't suit you." Axel gave a faint woof, leaning into the touch. Owen stood, slinging the evidence bag into his case file box. "There's something else, Sheriff." "What's that?" "Tracks," Owen said, pointing toward the side of the alley where faint impressions led toward the west end of town. "Small boot prints. Female, maybe size 6 or 7. Shallow steps. Someone was walking fast, not running." Harris followed the line of footprints. "West Silverpine. That's the old mill district." "Yeah, mostly low-income housing now." The sheriff sighed, the sound heavy in the cold air. "We'll canvass the area, see if anyone noticed a young woman moving around last night. But in this weather, could be anyone." Owen nodded, though his gut told him different. Something about the footprints, the hurried but careful placement, suggested fear, not recklessness. Whoever left that note wasn't trying to disappear completely. They wanted the baby found, just not by the wrong person. They returned to the patrol car, the snow beginning to fall again in fine, silent flakes. Harris leaned against the hood, lighting a cigarette despite the wind. "You planning to get some rest, Carter?" Owen shook his head. "Not yet. I want to check the West District first. Axel picked up the trail once already." The sheriff exhaled a plume of smoke. "You always were stubborn. Fine. But take backup if you go digging too deep. We don't know who we're dealing with yet." Owen gave a faint grin. "You know me, Sheriff. I've got the best backup there is." He patted Axel's head. Harris chuckled under his breath. "That you do." The two men parted ways, the sheriff heading back to his cruiser while Owen climbed into his own, Axel hopping up beside him. The heater hummed softly as Owen spread out the town map across the dashboard. The West District, narrow. Streets, old apartment blocks, the kind of place where doors stayed shut and curtains drawn. He'd patrolled it many times. He knew its quiet corners, the alleyways where secrets went to die. "Let's go take a look," he said, starting the engine. The drive was slow, tires crunching through slush as they passed shuttered windows and sagging porches. A few stray dogs trotted across the road before vanishing into the fog. The farther west they went, the rougher the houses became. Paint peeling, mailboxes dented, roofs heavy with snow. Owen parked near a cluster of old duplexes at the end of Sycamore Lane. He stepped out, scanning the area. A laundromat sign flickered half-dead nearby, its neon buzz faint against the winter air. Axel moved ahead, nose close to the ground. He paused near a narrow alley between two duplexes, tail rising slightly. The prints continued there, the same small size, partially filled with ice now. Owen followed them a few paces, stopping near a rusted trash can. Something caught the light. A scrap of fabric wedged beneath it. He crouched and pulled it free. It was part of a torn blanket, pink with faded cartoon prints. The same pattern he'd seen wrapped around the newborn. Owen stared at it for a long moment, the weight of it pressing into his palm. "She was here," he whispered. Axel whined softly, nose brushing the cloth. The wind picked up again, scattering snow into small spirals that danced through the alley. Owen folded the fragment carefully and tucked it into an evidence bag. Back in the car, he jotted notes into his logbook. Possible route west, likely mother fleeing on foot, blanket match to infant. Then he leaned back in the seat, eyes drifting toward the gray sky outside. In the rearview mirror, Axel's reflection stared back, ears half raised. The dog gave a low huff as if echoing his thoughts. "Yeah," Owen murmured. "She's out there somewhere. Scared. Alone." He turned the ignition, the engine growling to life once more. "We'll find her, boy, before someone else does." Outside, Silverpine remained silent beneath the snow, its secrets buried but not forgotten. The western edge of Silverpine was a different world, where the neat storefronts of Main Street gave way to rusted fences, peeling paint, and half-collapsed porches that leaned like weary old men. The snowstorm had buried everything under deceptive beauty, softening even the ugliest corners of town with its white shroud. But beneath the surface, Owen knew, this neighborhood hid things far darker than ice. Deputy Owen Carter drove slowly down Sycamore Lane, his patrol SUV crunching over frozen slush. Beside him, Clara Reeves sat in the passenger seat, her hair tied back beneath a knitted cap. She wasn't on duty at the hospital today, but she had insisted on coming along. The nurse's eyes were sharp, though exhaustion still clung to her like a shadow. She wore a gray winter coat over her scrubs, boots caked in salt, and her gloved hands fidgeted in her lap. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured, though her voice lacked conviction. "But I couldn't just stay in that room, watching her sleep. I needed to know what kind of person could do that to a baby." Owen glanced at her. "You're not here as a nurse today. You're here as someone who cares. That counts." Axel shifted in the back seat, ears twitching. The German shepherd had been restless since morning, whining softly whenever they passed the west end of town. Now his head was pressed close to the window, breath fogging the glass. They turned down a narrow side road lined with old, neglected houses. Faded Christmas lights still hung from some eaves, blinking feebly in the cold daylight. Most curtains were drawn tight. Owen slowed as Axel began to growl low in his throat. "You smell something?" he asked. The dog gave a short, deliberate bark. His tail stiffened, body tense. Owen followed his gaze. 100 feet ahead stood a two-story shack of weathered wood and warped siding. Its front porch sagged, and an old truck sat dead in the driveway, half buried in snow. A crooked mailbox read Maddox in black, peeling letters. Clara frowned. Earl Maddox. I've heard that name. Owen nodded grimly. He's known to us. 53 years old. Former factory worker. Lost his wife a decade ago, then lost everything else. Arrested twice for assault, once for illegal fostering without documentation. Sheriff Boone's been trying to pin him for months, but he keeps slipping through. Clara's face hardened. He's taken in children? Unofficially, Owen said, pulling the car to the curb. We think he was part of a black market adoption circle back in 2016. Nothing ever stuck, but rumors don't come from nowhere. The wind howled down the street, rattling a loose shutter against the side of the house. Owen turned off the engine. Stay here, he told Clara, though he already knew she wouldn't. She shot him a look. Don't even try it. I'm coming. Owen sighed, but said nothing. Together they stepped out into the brittle cold. Snow crunched under, their boots as they approached the property. Axel trotted ahead, nose to the ground, movements sharp and deliberate. The closer they got, the heavier the air seemed to grow. Owen scanned the house carefully, broken blinds in the windows, a rusted wind chime twisting in silence, and tracks in the snow leading from the porch to the side of the house. He motioned to Clara to stay behind him. If he's home, we keep this civil. No entry without a warrant, just observation. Clara nodded, though her eyes were fixed on Axel. The dog had stopped near the side of the house where a narrow cellar door was half hidden beneath snowdrifts. The wooden door hung slightly ajar. Axel's hackles rose. He growled low, teeth barely visible between his lips. Owen approached cautiously, hand hovering near his holster. Easy, boy. As he neared, he noticed a small stain near the cellar entrance. A dark smear on the wood, faint but unmistakable. Blood. Not old, not fresh. Clara, he said quietly, stay back. She ignored him, kneeling beside the porch steps. There's something here, she whispered. Her gloved hand lifted a small piece of fabric, pink, torn and soaked halfway through with melted snow. Owen's stomach tightened. That's from the same blanket, he muttered. The one we found near the alley. Clara stared at it, her face pale. So, she was here. Owen scanned the yard. Tire tracks curved out of the driveway, disappearing toward the main road. Someone's been in and out since the storm ended. Probably this morning. He stepped closer to the cellar door, the hinges creaking faintly as the wind caught it. The air that rose from the dark below was damp and foul. The smell of mildew and rot mixed with something acrid. Axel whined softly, nose twitching, then barked once, sharp and warning. Yeah, Owen said, eyes narrowing. I smell it too. He took a flashlight from his belt and leaned forward just enough to aim the beam inside. The light caught the outline of wooden steps descending into the dark. Something metallic gleamed faintly near the bottom. A tin can, perhaps, or tools. But then he noticed it. The faint scuff of a shoe print in the grime. Small. Too small for a man. Owen straightened, stepping back. We can't go in without a warrant. Not yet. Clara's brow furrowed. You think she's down there? He hesitated. If she was, she's gone now. But maybe she came here for help, or to hide. Clara looked toward the house. Or maybe to escape. Axel barked again, louder this time, his body angled toward the cellar as though daring whatever was inside to move. A curtain twitched upstairs. Owen froze. Someone's home. He stepped quickly back toward the driveway, motioning Clara behind the SUV. Moments later, the front door opened with a groan. Earl Maddox stepped out, blinking against the daylight. He was a thick, heavy man in a tattered plaid jacket and boots, caked with mud. His hair was greasy, beard uneven, and his breath carried the sharp tang of whiskey even in the cold. He squinted at Owen. What the hell are you doing on my property? Owen raised a hand calmly. "Morning, Mr. Maddox. Deputy Carter, Silver Pine Sheriff's Office. Just checking in after the storm. You notice anything strange around your place last night?" Earl snorted. "Strange? Aside from you snooping around my house?" "No." Clara, standing half-hidden behind the SUV, felt a shiver crawl up her spine. The man's tone wasn't just defensive. It was dangerous. Owen kept his expression neutral. "You live alone, right?" Earl's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just routine questioning," Owen replied evenly. "We're investigating an incident nearby." Earl spat into the snow. "Then investigate somewhere else. You ain't got a warrant." Owen nodded slowly. "You're right. We don't. Yet." He turned away, signaling subtly to Axel. The dog moved between him and the cellar door, never breaking eye contact with the man. Earl noticed the movement. "You keep that mutt back," he snapped. Owen's gaze hardened. "He's trained to detect danger. You wouldn't want him to get the wrong idea." For a tense moment, neither moved. Then Earl muttered something under his breath and slammed the door shut behind him. The sound echoed through the cold air. Clara exhaled shakily. "He's hiding something." Owen nodded. "And I'm going to find out what." He pulled out his phone, snapping a photo of the cellar door, the bloodstain, and the piece of fabric in Clara's hand. "I'll file this for a search warrant. Sheriff Boone will fast-track it once he sees this." Axel barked once more, still staring at the cellar. His fur bristled along his spine. Clara looked down at him. "He doesn't like this place." "Neither do I," Owen said quietly. "But we're coming back." They returned to the SUV, the sound of the engine muffled by the snow as they drove away. In the rearview mirror, Owen caught one last glimpse of the house. The shutter still swaying, the cellar door still slightly ajar. Behind it, the darkness seemed to breathe. The night wind carried the scent of frost and old secrets through the sleeping streets of Silver Pine. Street lights flickered weakly, struggling against the darkness that pooled between buildings. It was just past midnight when Deputy Owen Carter turned his patrol SUV down the stretch behind the old public library, an abandoned relic from the town's better days. Axel sat upright in the passenger seat, tail stiff, ears flicking toward the cracked brick building ahead. The library had been closed for years, its windows boarded, roof sagging under decades of neglect. Owen had passed it 100 times, but tonight something about it felt different. The radio crackled softly. "All units clear. No disturbances reported," came the dispatcher's voice. "Quiet night, huh?" Owen muttered. Axel didn't move. His body was tense, nose pressed to the window. Suddenly, the dog gave a sharp guttural bark, then lunged toward the door, the leash clipped to his harness strained tight. "Easy, boy. What is it?" Owen parked, stepping out into the icy air. His boots crunched over the frozen gravel. Axel was already pulling him toward the alley behind the library, every muscle taut with purpose. The wind moaned through broken eaves as they turned the corner. There, half hidden behind a pile of trash bins, something shifted. A faint whimper followed. Owen froze, hand instinctively resting on his holster. "Hello?" he called, his voice firm but calm. "You're not in trouble. Come out slowly." There was no reply, only the rustle of paper and the low growl from Axel's throat. Then, movement. A figure flinched in the shadows, trying to make itself smaller. Owen took a step forward, flashlight cutting through the gloom. The beam landed on a girl, barely more than 19, crouched behind the bin, her clothes soaked through. Her hair, chestnut brown and tangled, stuck to her pale face. Purple bruises bloomed along her cheek and wrists. She wore a torn, gray hoodie and mismatched shoes, her knees drawn to her chest. When the light hit her eyes, she raised a trembling hand. "Please," she whispered, "don't take me back." Owen's voice softened instantly. "I'm not here to hurt you." He crouched down, lowering the flashlight. "My name's Owen. I'm with the sheriff's department. What's your name?" The girl hesitated, her voice barely audible. Marissa Maddox." The name hit Owen like a stone to the chest. Maddox, Earl's house, the cellar, the blood. "Marissa," he said carefully. "You're Earl's daughter?" She shook her head quickly, eyes wide with fear. "Not his daughter. Not really. He said I belonged to him, but I don't. I never did." Her voice cracked. "He found me when I had nowhere to go. I was 17. My parents kicked me out. He said he'd help me, that I could stay in his house. But then—" Her breath came in shallow bursts. "He started locking me in, saying I owed him, that nobody would believe me if I ran." Axel whined softly, inching closer. Marissa flinched at first, then stared at the dog, her body relaxing slightly. He's not going to bite me?" Owen shook his head. "No. He's here to protect you." Tears streaked down her dirt-streaked face. "I didn't want to hurt the baby," she whispered. "I didn't want to leave her there, but he said if I didn't, he'd make sure she never saw the light of day." Owen felt a lump rise in his throat. "You're saying Earl made you leave her in that bin?" Marissa nodded weakly. "He said it was the only way. Said nobody could know. He watched me do it." Her voice broke into sobs. "I waited until he passed out. I ran. I didn't know where to go. I just wanted her to live." Owen exhaled slowly, steadying himself. The pieces were falling together, too perfectly, too painfully. "You did the right thing," he said gently. "You saved her life. She's safe now, at the hospital. Her name's Hope." Marissa blinked, confused. "Hope?" "Clara Reeves, the nurse, gave her that name," Owen said. "And she's alive because of you." Marissa covered her mouth, trembling. "She's alive?" "She is." For a moment, all the tension in her small frame dissolved. She began to sob, not in guilt this time, but in relief. Owen reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I need medical assistance at the old library, back alley. Female, 19. Injuries consistent with assault and exposure. Possible connection to suspect Earl Maddox." "Copy that, Unit 7, came the reply. "Ambulance en route, ETA 8 minutes. He turned back to Marissa. "You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you again." She shook her head. "You don't understand. He'll find me. He always does." Owen crouched closer, his voice low but steady. "He won't. Not this time. I'll make sure of it." Marissa looked at Axel, who had quietly moved closer until his muzzle rested near her knee. The dog's eyes were gentle, steady. Slowly, she extended a hand, letting her fingers brush his fur. For the first time in months, she didn't flinch. "Can I see her?" she whispered. Owen hesitated. "Let's get you warm and checked first. Then we'll talk about that." Marissa nodded faintly, too exhausted to argue. When the ambulance lights glowed at the end of the street, Owen felt a quiet relief settle in his chest. But he knew this wasn't over. The storm outside had passed, but another kind, darker, human, was still coming. As the medics lifted Marissa onto the gurney, Clara Reeves arrived in her silver sedan, having rushed from the hospital. She climbed out still wearing her navy coat and scarf, her hair messy from sleep. Her eyes widened when she saw the girl. "Is this her?" Clara asked softly. Owen nodded. "Marissa Maddox. She says she was living with Earl. Says he made her do it." Clara's face tightened. She knelt beside the gurney, her hand brushing a strand of hair from Marissa's forehead. "Hey, sweetheart, you're safe now. You did something brave tonight." Marissa's lip quivered. "I didn't think anyone would believe me." Clara's voice was warm, unwavering. "I do." For a brief moment, their eyes met. Two women bound by pain and survival. Clara recognized the haunted look in Marissa's eyes. It was the same reflection she'd seen in her own mirror years ago, after she'd lost everything. Can I see her baby?" Marissa asked again. Clara smiled gently. "When you're ready." The paramedics wrapped Marissa in a thermal blanket and loaded her into the ambulance. Owen gave them directions to take her back to Silver Pine General. As the doors closed, Clara turned to Owen. "He did this, didn't he?" Owen nodded grimly. "Every sign points to it. We've got enough for a warrant now." Clara's breath formed mist in the freezing air. "Then don't wait too long. Men like him don't sleep easy when they're cornered." Owen looked back toward the dark silhouette of the library, its boarded windows like blind eyes watching them. Axel stood beside him, fur bristling, gaze fixed on the empty alley where Marissa had been hiding moments ago. "She's just a kid," Owen murmured, "and she's been living in hell." Clara placed a hand on his arm. "Then let's make sure she never goes back." The ambulance pulled away, siren wailing faintly as it disappeared down the icy road. Owen and Clara stood in silence for a long while, snow beginning to fall again. Axel pressed against Owen's leg, tail flicking once. Owen gave a small nod. "Come on, partner. We've got work to do." As they walked back toward the SUV, the wind carried the faint sound of a baby crying somewhere far away. A memory, or maybe something else. Either way, Owen knew it was the sound of truth trying to be heard. The morning broke gray over Silverpine, a cold mist hanging low between the hills like the breath of ghosts. By dawn, the warrant had come through, signed by Judge Henley himself, carried in by a deputy who looked as if the paper burned to touch. The words were simple but heavy. Search and seizure. Residence of Earl Maddox. Deputy Owen Carter stood in the frozen yard of the Maddox property, snow crunching beneath his boots. The same crooked porch, the same sagging roof, the same silence that had unnerved him days earlier. But today was different. Today he wasn't alone, and he wasn't waiting outside. 3 squad cars idled at the curb, exhaust curling into the cold air. Sheriff Harris Boone was already there, bundled in his dark parka, his expression carved from stone. "You ready, Carter?" he asked. Owen nodded, tightening his gloves. "More than ready." Axel sat beside him, tail low, eyes fixed on the house. The dog's fur bristled in the wind, a living barometer of tension. Boone motioned to the 2 deputies behind him. "We go in clean. Maddox might still be here. He's unpredictable, maybe armed. No heroics, just control." The team approached the door. Owen raised his hand, knocking twice. "Sheriff's Department, we have a warrant." No answer. Boone gave the signal. The battering ram hit the lock once, then again. The door splintered inward with a crack that echoed down the street. The house smelled of dust, sweat, and something sour beneath it all. Old whiskey and rot. The living room was a ruin of broken furniture, bottles, and papers scattered across the floor. A small space heater hummed weakly in the corner, its light flickering. Owen's flashlight swept across the room, past the worn recliner, and toward the hallway that led to the cellar door. The same door Axel had growled at before. "Clear the top floor," Boone ordered. "Carter, you and Axel take the basement." Owen drew his flashlight and nodded. Axel padded ahead, nose close to the floor, body low and tense. The cellar door creaked as he pulled it open. Cold air rushed out, carrying the stench of mildew and decay. "Let's see what you've been hiding," Owen muttered, stepping down. The narrow wooden steps groaned beneath his weight. His flashlight beam swept across the dirt floor, catching on piles of old newspapers, tools, and rusted cans. Then something glinted in the far corner. A wooden chest, half buried beneath a tarp. Axel stopped in front of it, ears up, tail stiff. He barked once, sharp. Owen knelt beside the chest. The lock was old but flimsy. One strike from his flashlight cracked it open. Inside lay a collection of things that didn't belong together. Tiny baby clothes, a half-empty bottle of formula, and a worn blanket patterned with faded stars. Beneath them, sealed envelopes and documents. He pulled one free, squinting at the handwriting. Adoption records. Names scratched out, rewritten. Dates falsified. Signatures forged. "Boone!" Owen called up the stairs. "You need to see this." Footsteps thudded overhead before the sheriff appeared in the doorway, his breath fogging in the cold. He descended carefully, scanning the room. "What have you got?" Owen handed him one of the papers. "Falsified adoption contracts. Looks like Maddox was running an off-the-books baby ring, selling newborns through fake foster agencies. And these... He gestured to the box. Looks like trophies. Boone flipped through the stack, jaw tightening. Sick son of a... Something else caught Owen's eye. A notebook wedged behind the chest. He pulled it free. The cover was torn, the pages brittle. Inside were the journal entries scrawled in uneven handwriting. No child should be born in sin. No woman should disobey. They are mine to cleanse, mine to keep from corruption. God gives me tests. I deliver judgment. Boone's face darkened. He's not just a criminal. He's delusional. Owen nodded grimly. Religious fixation, control complex. He probably convinced himself he was saving them. Axel whined low, pacing near another corner. Owen followed his gaze and froze. Buried under a tarp was a small crib, covered in dust. The metal bars were bent, the mattress stained. A mobile hung above it, motionless except for a single star that spun lazily when the draft caught it. Jesus, Boone whispered. He kept her down here, didn't he? Owen's throat tightened. He didn't answer. He just crouched beside the crib, running a hand over the chipped paint. The faint smell of formula still clung to the fabric, sickly sweet. Get forensics down here, Boone ordered. Every inch of this place needs to be documented. Owen stood, staring at the walls. Faint marks lined the concrete. Scratches, numbers, tiny tally marks carved with something sharp. Days? Months? He swallowed hard. Above them, voices called out. Sheriff, we've got a blood trail in the kitchen. Looks old. Boone looked at Owen. He's been cleaning house. Owen clenched his jaw. Not well enough. By noon, the evidence had been tagged, photographed, and sealed. The chest, the journal, and the baby items were loaded into evidence crates. Forensic techs swept the basement for prints and DNA, their gloved hands moving with practiced precision. In the yard, Owen stood beside Axel, both watching as the boxes were carried out. Snow had begun to fall again, light and soundless. Boone joined him, holding a report. State lab confirmed what we suspected, he said. DNA from the baby blanket matches the sample we got from Marissa. She's the mother, no question. Owen exhaled, a breath half relief, half sorrow. Then it's official. He made her live through hell, and she still tried to save her child. Boone nodded. She's at the hospital now. Clara said she's awake. Wants to see you. Owen looked down at Axel, the dog's ear. Fur was speckled with snow, eyes steady and knowing. You hear that, boy? He said quietly. We found her truth, all because of you. Axel wagged his tail once, then looked back toward the house, growling softly as if the darkness beneath still whispered. Later that afternoon, Owen and Boone drove to Silverpine General Hospital. The snow had thickened, muffling the tires against the road. Inside, the heat and hum of fluorescent lights felt almost unreal after the chill outside. Clara met them in the hallway, her scrubs wrinkled, fatigue etched under her eyes. She's been asking for you, she said softly. She knows about the DNA results. They stepped into the small recovery room. Marissa Maddox sat on the bed, wrapped in a hospital blanket, her hair clean now, though her face was pale and drawn. Her hands trembled as she held a photograph, one of Hope, taken earlier that day, swaddled and sleeping. When she looked up at Owen, her eyes filled with tears. She's really mine. She is, Owen said gently. We confirmed it this morning. Marissa broke. The sob that escaped her was raw, guttural, years of fear collapsing into that single moment. Clara moved to her side, holding her shoulders as she cried. Owen looked away, giving her space, his chest tightening with quiet fury for everything that had been stolen from this girl. When Marissa's sobs finally softened, she looked at Owen through blurred eyes. He used to say she wasn't real, that she was just a punishment. But she's real, isn't she? Owen nodded. She's as real as the woman who gave her life. Clara smiled faintly, wiping a tear from her cheek. And as strong. Owen crouched beside Axel, his voice low but steady. "You didn't just save a baby that night, partner," he said, running a hand through the dog's fur. "You saved her mother, too." Axel pressed his muzzle against Owen's knee, letting out a soft sigh that felt almost human. Outside the window, snowflakes drifted like falling ashes, quiet, weightless, and cleansing. The storm had finally broken, but Silverpine didn't feel any safer. The streets were still hushed, thick with unspoken fear that traveled faster than the wind. By evening, the news had spread across town like wildfire. Earl Maddox had escaped police custody during transfer. No one knew how. The van had been found idling on Route 19, the driver unconscious, the restraints cut clean. At Silverpine General Hospital, Deputy Owen Carter stood at the end of the third-floor hallway, the weight of the news pressing down like the winter air. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, the hum of the building the only thing filling the silence. His uniform was rumpled from 2 days without proper rest, but his focus hadn't wavered. Axel lay by his side, head resting on his paws, eyes always alert, ears flicking toward every sound that echoed down the corridor. Inside room 312, Marissa Maddox slept under a thin blanket, her hair brushed neatly now, her face pale but calmer than before. Beside her, Clara Reeves sat in a chair, a cup of coffee cooling between her hands. She hadn't left the hospital since the arrest. It wasn't her duty. It was her promise. Owen stepped in quietly, his voice low. "You should get some rest, Clara." She shook her head. "I will. When this is over." He glanced at the small crib in the corner. Hope, wrapped in soft pink blankets, breathing in slow, steady rhythm. "She's sleeping better tonight," he said. "She knows her mother's near." Clara replied softly, her eyes lingering on Marissa's peaceful face. Owen nodded, but didn't smile. The shadow in his expression was unmistakable. "You heard the news?" Clara's grip tightened around the cup. "I did. Maddox. Escaped about 3 hours ago. Boone's men are sweeping the highway and nearby woods, but he's not the kind to run far. He'll come back to finish what he started." Clara looked up sharply. "You think he'd come here? To the hospital?" Owen met her gaze. "If I were him, I would." Axel lifted his head at the tone in Owen's voice, tail curling tight against his body. By midnight, an extra patrol unit had been stationed outside the building. Owen arranged for an officer on every exit and placed cameras near the nursery hall. Still, something about the quiet felt wrong. Too still, too calm, like the world was holding its breath. Snow began to fall again outside, tiny flakes glinting against the parking lot lights. Owen leaned against the window, eyes scanning the dark beyond the glass. He could feel Axel's weight against his leg, the steady rhythm of the dog's breathing grounding him. Then, around 2 a.m., the radio crackled softly on Owen's belt. "Unit 7, security reports a flicker on hallway cam 2, third floor." Owen straightened instantly. What kind of flicker? Unknown. Could be interference, could be movement. Hard to tell. Just static now. He turned to Axel. "Let's check it." Out, and the hallway stretched long and narrow, lit by cold blue light. Owen's boots made no sound on the polished tile. At the far end, a faint haze clung to the air. Cigarette smoke. "Someone's been here," Owen murmured, voice barely a whisper. Axel's nose twitched. He growled low, deep in his chest. The sound was quiet, but full of warning. Owen followed the dog's gaze. Near the door to the neonatal wing, a red ember glowed faintly on the floor, the smoldering end of a cigarette. Still warm. He crouched down, his gloved fingers brushing the ash. His pulse quickened. "He's close." Axel moved toward the glass doors leading to the nursery hall. His stance changed. Low, defensive. The fur along his spine bristled. He positioned himself squarely between the door and the hallway beyond. "Easy, boy," Owen whispered, reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, I need security lockdown on the third floor. Possible suspect inside. Repeat, lockdown now." The radio hissed back with static. No response. The line was dead. Owen's eyes darted to the overhead camera. The small red light that should have been blinking was dark, disabled. He moved toward the nearest intersection, flashlight raised. The silence pressed close, the hum of the hospital suddenly too quiet. From somewhere near the stairwell came a faint metallic clank, the soft echo of a door shifting on its hinges. Axel barked once, sharp, the sound cutting through the stillness. Owen spun, weapon drawn, moving in controlled steps toward the noise. He reached the stairwell door, slightly ajar. A gust of cold air swept through, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of tobacco and sweat. Owen pushed the door open with the edge of his boot, flashlight slicing down the stairwell. The beam caught nothing but the empty metal railing and the slow drift of snow blowing in through the open exit at the bottom. He moved fast now, taking the stairs two at a time. Axel was right behind him, growling under his breath. At the bottom landing, the door to the outside stood wide open, snow swirling in from the dark. Footprints led away across the service lot, heavy boots, fresh, melting at the edges. Owen followed them to the fence where the snow was disturbed again, the tracks vanishing into the forest beyond. He exhaled sharply, scanning the tree line. The only sound was the whistle of wind and the faint creak of the gate swinging on its hinge. Behind him, Axel gave a short bark, drawing his attention to something near the door. There, in the snow, lay a torn piece of paper, folded once. The edges were damp, ink bleeding from the cold. Owen picked it up carefully. One line was scrawled across it in shaky, heavy script. "If I can't have them, no one will." Owen's stomach turned to ice. He rushed back inside, voice snapping over his radio now that the signal returned. "Lock down every floor. I repeat, full lockdown. Maddox was here." By the time he reached the third floor again, the lights were flashing red, alarms beginning to wail. Nurses rushed to secure patients. Clara emerged from Marissa's room, eyes wide. "What's happening?" Owen grabbed her arm. "Maddox was in the building, near the nursery." Her face went pale. Dear God. They ran into Marissa's room. She was awake now, clutching Hope tightly to her chest. The baby whimpered at the sudden noise, her tiny fists curling against the blanket. Owen moved to the window. Snow still fell outside, masking everything in white. He could see the trail of footprints fading fast under the fresh layer. "He's gone for now," Owen said quietly, "but not far." Clara swallowed hard. "He won't stop, will he?" "No," Owen said, glancing down at Axel who stood guard near the door, ears trained on the hallway. "He's a hunter, and hunters always circle back." He turned back toward Marissa. "You and the baby aren't leaving this hospital until we catch him. I'll station officers outside the room." Marissa nodded weakly, tears brimming. "He said he'd find me, that he always would." Owen's voice softened, but his eyes were firm. "He's not the only one who knows how to track." He looked at Axel. "Right, partner?" The dog gave a low, steady bark, not out of fear, but resolve. For a long moment, the four of them stayed there. The mother clutching her child, the nurse holding her breath, the deputy watching the storm, and the dog standing guard against the shadows. Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing all traces of the man who had vanished into the dark. But Owen knew the hunt wasn't over, not yet. By dawn, Silverpine lay beneath another fresh blanket of white, soft, silent, deceptive. From the outside, the small mountain town looked peaceful again, its rooftops sparkling beneath a pale sunrise. But beneath that stillness, tension coiled tight. No one had slept. The hunt for Earl Maddox was on. Deputy Owen Carter stood outside Silverpine General Hospital, his breath misting in the frigid air. The parking lot had been cordoned off with yellow tape, patrol cars circling like sentinels. He hadn't slept in 20 hours, but fatigue couldn't dull his focus now. Inside, Marissa Maddox and her newborn daughter were under guard, with Clara Reeves refusing to leave their side. Sheriff Harris Boone approached from behind, the gravel crunching under his boots. Boone was a heavy-set man in his late 50s, his weathered face marked by years of small-town crime that had never reached this kind of darkness. His brown Stetson sat low on his forehead, his voice as steady as ever. "You really think he's still around here?" he asked. Owen adjusted the strap of his rifle, eyes scanning the tree line beyond the hospital. "Maddox isn't the running type. He's obsessed. Everything he's done, the control, the secrecy, it's all about power. Men like that don't vanish into the woods. They circle back." Boone nodded grimly. "Then let's make sure we're waiting when he does." Just then, Axel lifted his head from the snow, nose twitching. The German shepherd sniffed the air, body tensing. He began to move, slow and deliberate, toward the back of the lot. Owen's instincts kicked in. He's got something. The dog's pace quickened, leading them down the narrow access road that ran behind the hospital toward the old freight yard. The path was lined with tall pines, their branches sagging under the weight of snow. Smoke rose faintly in the distance, no more than a thin gray thread against the cold sky. Boone frowned. "That's not from any chimney." They followed the trail until Axel stopped at the chain-link fence surrounding an abandoned supply warehouse once used for hospital storage decades ago. Half collapsed and forgotten, it sat near the edge of the town cemetery, where frostbitten crosses jutted like teeth from the snow. Axel growled, pawing at the gate. The smell was unmistakable, tobacco and something metallic beneath it. Owen motioned to Boone. "He's inside." Boone radioed for backup, his tone low and clipped. "All units, converge on the north lot by the cemetery. Suspect possibly located in the old warehouse. Proceed with caution." The response crackled through the static. "Copy that." Owen unclipped Axel's leash, meeting the dog's steady, intelligent gaze. "Stay low, partner." They entered through a side door hanging on one hinge. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and rust. Shafts of light pierced through the broken roof, glinting off piles of old hospital equipment. Rusted. Beds, IV stands, shattered glass. The sound of water dripping echoed faintly, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Owen moved silently between the debris, flashlight sweeping the dark corners. His breath caught when the beam landed on a small lantern still burning on a crate, and beside it, a half-smoked cigarette crushed into the wood. Then, from deeper inside the warehouse came a voice. "You shouldn't have come alone, deputy." Owen froze. The voice was hoarse, bitter, unmistakably Earl Maddox. The man stepped from behind a rusted shelving unit, his heavy coat dusted with snow, a revolver dangling loosely from his right hand. His eyes were wild, rimmed red from exhaustion and rage. "You took everything from me," he hissed. "Everything I made." Owen steadied his aim. "Put the gun down, Earl. It's over." Earl laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "Over? You don't understand. That child, that thing, was never meant to live. She's the devil's reminder. Her mother was filth. I was trying to save her." Axel snarled, stepping between them, hackles raised. Earl's eyes flicked to the dog. That mutt again, always in the way. Owen's voice dropped, calm but commanding. "Don't do this, Earl. You can still walk out of here alive." But Earl raised his gun, trembling but deadly steady. "Then maybe I'll take one of you with me." The sound of the hammer clicking echoed through the vast, empty hall. Before Owen could react, Axel lunged, a blur of black and tan muscle crashing through the cold air. The dog hit Maddox full force, jaws clamping onto his wrist. The revolver went off, the bullet ricocheting into the wall, sparks flying. Maddox howled, twisting, trying to shake Axel off, but the dog's grip was unrelenting. Owen charged forward, tackling Maddox to the ground. The two men struggled, boots scraping on the ice-slick floor. Owen landed a blow to Maddox's jaw, but the older man swung back with his free arm, catching Owen across the shoulder. The impact sent pain shooting down his side. "Axel, hold!" Owen barked. The dog released the arm and backed off, teeth bared, growling low. Maddox tried to reach for the fallen gun, but Owen kicked it away and slammed his knee into the man's chest. Boone and 2 deputies burst through the door seconds later, weapons drawn. "Drop it, Maddox!" Boone shouted, though the fight was already over. Owen cuffed the man, his breath ragged. Blood trickled from Maddox's lip, staining the snow-dusted floor. Boone holstered his weapon, eyes narrowing. "You all right?" Owen nodded, wincing as he flexed his arm. "Just grazed." He looked at Axel, whose fur was matted with snow but whose tail wagged faintly. "He got to me before the bullet did." Boone gave a small grin. "Good dog." Outside, the early sun broke through the clouds, casting pale gold over the cemetery. Officers led Maddox away, head down, muttering under his breath. The world seemed to exhale as the danger finally ended. Back at the hospital, Clara was waiting near the entrance when Owen returned. She rushed forward the moment she saw him, her face a mix of relief and reprimand. "You shouldn't have gone in there alone," she scolded, though her voice trembled with emotion. "I wasn't alone," Owen said, glancing down at Axel, who padded beside him with a proud but tired gait. Clara's stern expression softened. She reached out, her gloved fingers brushing the cut on his cheek. "You could have been killed. Wouldn't be the first time," Owen replied, forcing a faint smile. "But I'm still here, and so is she." They walked together down the hall toward Marissa's room. Through the window they could see her sitting up, Hope nestled in her arms, sunlight streaming across both their faces. The child's tiny hand rested over her mother's heart, as if to remind the world that life, fragile as it was, still chose to keep beating. Clara looked up at Owen, her eyes soft but bright. "You did it." Owen shook his head. "We did it, all of us, even him." He nodded toward Axel, who sat obediently by the door, tail brushing against the tile. Clara smiled, the kind that thawed winter's edge, slow and genuine. "Then maybe this town isn't as lost as it feels." Owen chuckled quietly. "Not while there's still something worth protecting." For a long moment, neither spoke. The world outside the window glowed with new light, the storm finally spent. And, in that fragile peace, something unspoken stirred between them, a warmth that neither the snow nor the darkness could take away. Axel gave a soft huff, curling at Owen's feet, his job done for now. Outside, the sirens faded, leaving only the sound of morning wind, the whisper of a town learning how to heal. The storm had passed, leaving Silverpine bathed in quiet gold. Snow still blanketed the rooftops, but the air no longer bit with hostility. It carried instead a softness, like forgiveness settling over the town. The hospital parking lot was calm for the first time in days. Inside, the fluorescent hum gave way to murmurs of life, of healing. Deputy Owen Carter walked slowly down the polished corridor of Silverpine General Hospital, his right arm bandaged where the bullet had grazed him. His uniform jacket was replaced with a simple gray sweater and worn jeans, a change that made him look more human, less like the unyielding protector he'd been all week. Axel, his loyal German shepherd, padded beside him, his paws clicking softly against the tile. Around his neck hung a small bronze badge, freshly engraved with 2 words, Guardian of Grace. In room 214, Marissa Maddox sat upright in bed, her long brown hair brushed clean for the first time since her rescue. She wore a pale blue hospital gown, her hands trembling slightly as she cradled her newborn daughter. The baby was sleeping soundly, wrapped in a white blanket that Clara had chosen herself, embroidered with a single stitched dove. Clara Reeves, standing nearby, watched them with quiet reverence. Her auburn hair was pulled into a loose bun, and faint shadows rested under her green eyes. She'd been working double shifts ever since the night of the storm, but today her exhaustion seemed softened by something gentler. Pride, perhaps, or peace. When Owen entered, Clara turned to him with a smile that carried both relief and affection. "You're just in time," she whispered. Marissa looked up, her gaze uncertain at first. The bruises on her face had faded to faint yellow marks, and her once wary expression had transformed into something fragile yet radiant. "I was waiting for you," she said softly to Owen, "for both of you." Owen stepped closer, resting his hand on the metal rail of her bed. "How's she doing?" "She's strong," Marissa said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Stronger than I'll ever be." She brushed a fingertip across the baby's cheek. "The doctor said she's healthy. That's all that matters." Owen nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "She's a fighter, like her mom." Marissa looked down at the infant again. For a long moment, silence filled the room. A silence not of grief, but of awe, of the fragile miracle before them. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, she said, "I've decided on her name." Clara leaned in. "What will it be?" "Grace," Marissa said, "because grace is something I never believed I deserved. But somehow, she's proof that I got it anyway." The name lingered in the air like a prayer. Owen felt his throat tighten. He reached out, brushing the edge of the baby's blanket with his fingers. "Grace," he repeated softly. "That's perfect." Axel, sitting by the bed, gave a low rumble in his chest, tail thumping once as if in agreement. Marissa smiled at him, the first real smile Owen had seen on her face. "He saved her," she whispered. "He saved me." Clara crouched down and scratched behind Axel's ear. "He saved more lives than most of us ever will," she said. Outside, the town was stirring. Word had spread quickly about what had happened. The baby in the snow, the dog's bark, the man's arrest. For the first time in years, Silverpine had gathered for something not born of tragedy, but of gratitude. That afternoon, the hospital courtyard filled with people wrapped in scarves and thick coats, their breath visible in the crisp air. Sheriff Harris Boone stood at a small wooden podium, his hat clutched respectfully to his chest. Behind him, a banner fluttered gently in the winter breeze, a town's thanks, to courage, compassion, and a dog named Axel. Children stood on tiptoe to see over the crowd. Nurses, shopkeepers, and old war veterans lined the walkways. Even the mayor, a stout man named Robert Clay, was there, wearing a brown overcoat and a smile that didn't come easily to him. Clara held Marissa's wheelchair near the front, the baby bundled tightly in her arms. Owen stood beside them, Axel sitting proud and alert at his heel. Boone's voice carried through the courtyard. "In every community, there comes a moment that tests who we are. For Silverpine, that moment came on the coldest night of the year, when a cry in the snow might have gone unheard, if not for the instincts of one faithful dog and the heart of the man who followed him." The crowd murmured softly, a ripple of emotion spreading. Boone turned toward Owen and gestured. "Deputy Owen Carter, step forward." Owen hesitated, then obeyed, Axel matching his stride. Boone continued, his tone solemn but warm. "You showed this town what it means to serve, not just with duty, but with humanity. And Axel here," he knelt slightly, fastening a small golden tag to Axel's collar, "proved that heroes come in all forms." The tag gleamed in the light. Etched on it were the words, "Guardian of Grace." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling like a wave. Children clapped wildly. Adults wiped at their eyes. Marissa held Grace close to her heart, tears streaking down her cheeks, whispering a silent thank you toward the sky. When the ceremony ended, Owen crouched beside Axel, rubbing the dog's fur. "You earned it, buddy," he murmured. Axel pressed his head into Owen's chest, tail wagging faintly. Clara approached with 2 paper cups of cocoa, her breath curling in the cold. "You looked nervous up there," she teased lightly. "Guess I'm better at chasing criminals than standing on stage," Owen replied with a grin. She handed him a cup, her gloved fingers brushing his. "Still," she said softly, "you and Axel gave this town back its heart." Owen looked out across the crowd dispersing into the snow, laughter and music echoing faintly from the speakers. For once, Silverpine didn't feel heavy with ghosts. It felt alive. Marissa wheeled closer, Grace now asleep against her chest. I'll never forget what you did, she said quietly. Either of you. Owen shook his head. You don't owe us anything. Maybe not, she said, but I'll spend my life trying to be the kind of person my daughter can be proud of. The kind of person who listens, like Axel did. The words caught Owen off guard. He blinked, then smiled. Then she's already got the best start possible. As the sun began to dip behind the pines, Clara reached into her coat pocket and handed Marissa a small envelope. From the town, she said. It's not much, just a start to help you get on your feet. There's a cottage near the church that's been empty since the summer. The owners agreed to let you stay rent-free for a few months. Marissa's lips parted in disbelief. I don't know what to say. Say, thank you, Owen said gently, and take it. Grace deserves warmth, not fear. Marissa's tears glistened under the dying light. Then thank you, all of you, for giving us both a chance to live again. The church bells rang across Silverpine, soft and clear, mingling with the rustle of snow and the faint laughter of children. The sound seemed to settle into every heart present, a reminder that even the coldest nights could end in warmth if someone chose to care. Owen turned to Clara, a quiet smile forming. You ever think maybe faith isn't about what you believe, but what you do when someone needs you? Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading sun. Maybe faith is just love with work boots on, she said. They both laughed softly as Axel barked once as if agreeing with her wisdom. The snow began to fall again. Light this time, peaceful. Marissa stood, holding her baby close, looking up toward the sky. Grace, she whispered again, as if naming her hope to the heavens, and for the first time she truly believed that she and her daughter were safe. Spring in Silverpine didn't come with flowers or green meadows. It came quietly, as a gentler kind of cold. The snow that once buried the town in silence now melted into thin silver streams, whispering through gutters and over stones. Life had begun to thaw again. 3 months had passed since the night Owen Carter and his German shepherd Axel pulled a newborn from a trash bin in the storm. The story had rippled far beyond Silverpine. Newspapers called it the miracle in the snow, but for Owen it wasn't a headline. It was home. His cabin sat on the edge of the forest, a small 2-bedroom structure built from pine and patience. Smoke curled from the chimney, and inside the sound of laughter warmed the air. The once quiet house now echoed with life, the kind of noise that fills the empty spaces grief used to own. At the kitchen counter, Clara Reeves stood wearing a soft cream sweater and jeans, her auburn hair tied loosely as she stirred a pot of soup. Steam fogged the window beside her, framing the snow-dusted woods outside. She'd started visiting more often after Marissa and the baby had moved in under the town's temporary protection program. Just to check on them, she had told Sheriff Boone, but everyone knew it was more than that. Marissa Maddox sat at the old dining table, now scrubbed and bright. The 19-year-old looked healthier than she had in months, cheeks flushed with color, her long brown hair tucked behind her ears. She was folding tiny baby clothes with practiced care, pausing every now and then to check on Grace, who lay gurgling softly in a woven crib near the fireplace. The little girl was almost 4 months old now, plump and rosy, wrapped in a yellow blanket that Clara had knitted herself. Owen sat nearby in his worn armchair, boots off, a rare moment of rest. His flannel shirt was rolled at the sleeves, revealing the faint scar along his arm, the only visible trace of that night. He watched the scene before him, a small smile tugging at his lips. For once, his house didn't feel like a place to return to after long shifts. It felt lived in. Axel lay at Grace's crib, his aging body curled protectively against the rug. His muzzle had turned almost white now, and one of his ears drooped slightly, an imperfection Owen secretly found endearing. Though slower these days, Axel still rose whenever Grace whimpered, resting his nose against the edge of her blanket until she quieted. "See?" Owen said softly, his voice carrying warmth. "He's still got it." Clara turned from the stove and smiled. He's got more instinct than most doctors I know." Marissa laughed, a quiet, shy sound that had grown stronger each week. "Grace sleeps better when he's there," she said. "It's like she knows he saved her." Owen leaned back, his gaze drifting toward the dog. He did more than that. The room fell gently silent. Outside, wind brushed against the window, rattling the last icicles from the roof. Later that evening, dinner filled the cabin with the smell of garlic and fresh bread. The four of them gathered around the table: Owen, Clara, Marissa, and baby Grace in her small crib nearby. It was an imperfect family, bound not by blood, but by something that ran deeper: redemption. After they ate, Owen stepped outside for firewood. The twilight sky glowed purple, snowflakes falling in slow motion through the lamplight. Clara followed him, pulling her coat tighter. "Still, can't get used to how quiet it gets up here," she said, her breath misting. Owen chuckled. "Quiet's good. Means the world's giving us a break." She tilted her head, studying him. "You ever thought about what happens when Marissa and Grace move out? When things go back to normal?" He looked toward the window where Axel's silhouette could be seen watching over Grace. "This is normal," he said softly, for the first time in a long while. Inside, Grace stirred, and Axel lifted his head, letting out a small, reassuring huff. Marissa hummed a lullaby as she rocked her daughter. The melody floated through the glass, fragile, beautiful. Clara leaned against the porch railing, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've changed, Owen." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I just remembered who I used to be." They stood there in silence for a moment, listening to the gentle fall of snow. Then Clara said something she'd wanted to ask for weeks. "When you said he saved more than the baby, what did you mean?" Owen took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the flakes melting against his palm. "Axel didn't just save a child. He saved her mother, and maybe—" He paused, his voice softer now. "Maybe he saved me too." Clara's eyes glistened under the porch light. "You mean from loneliness?" Owen nodded. "From forgetting that love still exists, even after you've buried most of what you thought mattered." The wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of laughter from inside. Marissa's soft giggle, the baby's coo. Owen smiled. "That sound. It's what I think heaven might feel like." Clara looked at him for a long moment before whispering, "Then don't let it go." Later that night, when the fire had burned down to embers, the cabin settled into stillness. Owen sat on the floor beside Grace's crib, running a gentle hand through Axel's fur. The dog's breathing was slow and steady, eyes half closed. The badge on his collar, Guardian of Grace, glimmered faintly in the firelight. "You've done enough, buddy," Owen murmured. "You can rest easy now." Axel opened one eye and gave a soft, tired wag of his tail, as if to say, "Not yet." From the couch, Marissa stirred awake. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, watching them. "He really never leaves her side, does he?" "Not once," Owen said. "He's been like that since the day she was born," Sarissa's expression softened. "Then maybe Grace will grow up believing that angels don't have wings. They just have paws." Owen smiled at that. "I'd like to believe that too." The clock ticked softly in the background. Outside, snow began to fall again. The quiet, lazy kind that made the world seem wrapped in peace. Clara walked over from the kitchen, carrying a steaming mug of chamomile tea, her hair loose around her shoulders. She sat beside Owen and whispered, "It's late. You should rest." He looked at her and then at the baby, asleep and safe. "I am resting," he said simply. The fire flickered one last time before settling into a warm glow. Axel gave a slow, contented sigh, resting his muzzle near the crib. His tail brushed lightly against the floor. Once, twice, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. Clara leaned her head against Owen's shoulder. "He really did save 3 people, didn't he?" Owen's voice came low, full of gratitude. "Yeah, a child, a mother, and whatever was left of me." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the dying fire and the faint whisper of snow brushing against the windows. Grace's small hand moved in her sleep, reaching into the air as if touching something unseen. Outside, the night glowed soft and silver. The blizzard that had once taken everything from them had given something back. A family born from kindness, from loss, from one dog's unrelenting faith. And, as the narrator's voice might have said, if stories truly had endings, it was this. If there are miracles in this world, they don't always come with thunder or light. Sometimes they come as a single bark in the snow, the sound that wakes the human heart. Axel's eyes fluttered closed, his body at peace. Beside him, life continued, soft, fragile, and beautifully human. In the end, Axel was more than a dog. He was a reminder that faith doesn't always come from sermons or miracles written in books. Sometimes it comes from a heartbeat on 4 paws. He didn't speak, yet through his loyalty and courage he preached a truth older than words, that love protects, hope redeems, and kindness saves lives. Maybe God doesn't always send angels with wings. Maybe, on a cold night in a small town, he sent one with fur, to show us that even when the world feels frozen, compassion can still melt the snow. Axel didn't just rescue a baby and her mother. He awakened the faith that lies sleeping in all of us, the belief that no act of goodness is ever too small to change a life. So tonight, as you finish this story, remember, miracles don't always arrive with trumpets. Sometimes they arrive with a bark. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that love still exists in this world. Leave a comment below and tell us what you believe is the real miracle in your life. And if you believe God still works through gentle souls, both human and animal. Type Amen in the comments. May God bless you, protect your loved ones, and fill your days with the quiet kind of miracles that whisper, "You are not alone." And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so together we can keep spreading stories of hope, faith, and the light that never fades.